Scrum Masters Elite_UK, a place that analyzes and clarifies the journey of David Havili and the lessons about change, competition, and present value. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out.
When looking at the journey of David Havili and the changes taking place in the selection system of the New Zealand national rugby union team, I don't think this is simply a sports news story. To me, it feels like a very real slice of life, a place where yesterday's success doesn't guarantee tomorrow's position, and where everyone must always be ready to prove their value again when the past is no longer a guaranteed ticket. David Havili was once an important part of the national team. He has made many international appearances and contributed to the team across different periods. But what made me think the most wasn't those numbers, it was the reality that even for a player with that much experience, his position is never truly guaranteed. The last time Havili wore the All Blacks jersey was in November 2024, in a match against Italy. After that, although he continued playing and even helped lead the Crusaders to the Super Rugby Pacific title, he still wasn't heavily used in 2025. When I think about this, I realize a truth that is quite familiar in life. There are times when we perform very well, but then circumstances change, the system changes, leadership changes, and when that happens, almost everything feels like it has been reset. Not because someone is no longer good, but simply because the game has moved on to a new chapter.
A new coach, a new mindset. The arrival of Dave Rennie as the new head coach of the All Blacks creates an interesting situation. What caught my attention most was his statement that he has no loyalty when selecting the squad. At first, that might sound a bit cold. But after thinking about it more carefully, I see it as a very straightforward perspective. In elite sports, fairness is sometimes defined by something very simple. Whoever performs best right now gets selected. Not the most famous player, not the one with the most achievements in the past, but the one performing best in the present. This reminds me of many other areas of life. In many places, people are still influenced by seniority, old relationships, or familiarity. But in truly competitive environments, things usually return to a very basic principle: current performance, and perhaps that's exactly what Rennie wants to build. A fresh start for everyone. What impressed me about Havili is how he reacted to the situation. He didn't seem dissatisfied. He didn't complain. Nor did he show excessive expectation. He simply said that this is a fresh start, and that the most important thing is to perform well in Super Rugby. That statement sounds simple, almost routine. But if you put yourself in his position, not everyone could remain that calm. A player who once stood at the top, who had worn the national jersey many times, suddenly having to prove himself again from the beginning, that's not easy psychologically. But Havili seems to accept that reality, not with resignation, but with professionalism. He understands that the only way back to the national team isn't by talking about the past, but by performing in the present.
Competition, the greatest motivation in sport. One thing I like most in this story is how Havili talks about competition. He believes that players all across New Zealand will give their best to impress the new coach. This creates an interesting picture in my mind, at every club. In every Super Rugby Pacific match, in every moment on the field, players know that an opportunity might be waiting. And when opportunities are not blocked by old assumptions, everyone's motivation increases. I think this is one of the greatest strengths of sport. It creates an environment where effort can actually be seen. Life isn't always that fair. But sports, at least in many cases, still try to move toward that idea. A very short preparation period. Another detail that made me think is that Rennie won't return to New Zealand full-time until the Japan Rugby League 1 season ends in late May. This means he will have very little time to prepare the national team before the international tests in July. From my perspective, that's quite a challenge. In rugby, building combinations between players is extremely important. Positions like fly half, centre, and fullback require strong understanding with one another. When preparation time is shortened, the coach must make decisions quickly and accurately, and that means every club-level performance becomes more important than ever.
A coach with a strong reputation. Havili said he has never been coached directly by Rennie, but through people who have worked with him, especially players who previously played for the Chiefs, he has heard many positive things. That made me realize something interesting about New Zealand rugby. It's a very connected ecosystem. Players, coaches, former players, everyone has some form of connection with each other. And a coach's reputation is often built over years of working with different teams. Rennie previously coached the Wallabies, the Glasgow Warriors, and the Kobelco Kobe Steelers. Those experiences surely gave him many different perspectives on tactics and team management. His return to New Zealand after nearly a decade overseas brings a lot of expectations. Not only expectations about results, but also expectations about a new approach, focusing on what can be controlled. The thing that made me think the most is not whether Havili will be called back to the national team. It's his attitude. He didn't say he deserved it. He didn't demand a chance. He didn't try to put pressure on the coach. He simply said he would try to play well. It sounds simple, but it's actually a very mature approach. In life, we often focus too much on things outside our control, other people's decisions, other people's evaluations, or opportunities that others give us. But Havili seems to focus on the only thing he can control, his performance.
Thinking about this story, I realized a few lessons for myself. First, the past does not guarantee the future. Past achievements may earn respect, but they cannot replace present effort. Second, opportunities sometimes come from changes that initially seem unfavorable. A new coach may make many players nervous, but it also opens doors for those who previously had fewer opportunities. Third, attitude is just as important as ability. A person may be very talented, but without professionalism and composure in difficult moments, opportunities can easily slip away. Looking at sport more broadly, as sports followers, we sometimes judge players simply by whether they are selected or not. If a player is not in the squad, we may quickly assume that he is past his prime or not good enough anymore. But reality is usually far more complex. In elite sport, team selection depends on many factors: tactics, playing style, positional combinations, and the long-term plan of the coach. So instead of judging too quickly, perhaps fans should look at things more broadly, a reflection of life itself. If we remove the sports element, this story actually reflects something very universal in life. The world changes, jobs change, environments change, leaders change, and when those changes happen, everyone must adapt. Not everyone likes that. But perhaps it's an inevitable part of growth. Those who keep moving forward are often the ones who accept that they must prove themselves many times in life.
A journey that is still open. The interesting thing is that David Havili's story doesn't have an ending yet. He may be called back to the national team, or he may not. But regardless of the outcome, the way he faces this situation already says a lot about who he is. Calmness, professionalism, and focus on doing his job. In a sports world often filled with pressure and expectations, those are qualities worthy of respect. And that's when I realized this isn't really a story about whether a player gets selected for the national team or not. It's a story about how people face change. And perhaps that's why I find it worth reflecting on. Because in each of our lives, there will always be new coaches, new seasons, and new competitions. What matters is not where we once were, but what we are willing to do when opportunity appears again.
Scrum Masters Elite_UK says goodbye for now. The past doesn't guarantee the future. What matters is today's effort. See you in the next video. And don't forget to subscribe.